I read 25 books in May, and I also DNF'd 4 books, so let's rank them from worst to best. Also, hi, hello, this is my first YouTube video in my book space. I'm used to doing short form content on TikTok and Instagram, so the fact that I can just yap for however long I want on this channel is making me so excited. I feel like I'm going to have to switch over my brain because I'm so used to having to condense my thoughts and cut out all pauses and not take any time to think, so this will definitely be a change of atmosphere, but I'm really excited because actually reading wrap-ups like the monthly ones and the yearly ones are my favorite videos to watch from other book content creators. So the fact that I'm doing one of my own to start my YouTube channel just feels so fitting. All right, so let's start with my DNFs. The first book I DNF'd is Dungeon Crawler Carl, both the actual book and the graphic novel I got because I was really struggling with the actual novel. So then I got the graphic novel to see if maybe that would help me get through it quicker. And then I couldn't even get through the graphic novel. You guys, I just feel like this book is not for me, and that's okay. I am not going to say this is a bad book or this is a bad series because clearly it is so beloved. The main reason why I picked it up is because my husband adores this series, and then I also had 3 girlfriends back to back to back in like a week read it and love it. So I just felt like it was divine timing. It was my time to read it, and I just could not connect, unfortunately. I think the lit RPG style got very repetitive. I totally understand that a lot of people are like, well, the second and future books are not that repetitive, it's just the intro, but I am not someone who can read a poor first book and then go on to read the rest of the series. Just does not work for my brain. And I also found some of the descriptions of some of the bosses a bit offensive. I don't know. I could just tell that it was written by a man, and I really hate when that permeates my reading experience. And yeah, like I said, I'm super happy for everyone that loves this series, but it just is not for me, and I'm officially accepting that I am DNFing, even though it is a little bit painful because I wanted to be able to read it for my husband so we could talk about it, but just not for me. I also DNF'd Femme Feral. Now, this book I got from a special edition from the Goldsboro UK bookstore because it looked really interesting for me and up my alley. Sort of this weird girl-lit femme horror. I think I only got like 70 to 80 pages in, so it's hard for me to give you a synopsis. It was about a woman in her mid-40s or 50s, and she had like just gotten passed over for being CEO. She was kind of annoyed at her husband, her kids, she's kind of feeling stuck in her middle age, and then she gets diagnosed with perimenopause and starts having normal symptoms like hot flashes, but then also some abnormal symptoms like memory gaps and going out in the middle of the night and waking up drenched in blood. So for the first like 50 pages, I was really into it, and then for some reason it just slowed dramatically. So then by the 70 or 80 page mark, I was just not wanting to continue the story. I just had no investment. However, I then found out after I DNF'd it officially, I always go to the reviews. I just like to see what people say. Apparently, the author admitted to using AI in this story. So if you go to the author's note of Femme Feral, the author admits to using generative AI for 1 or 2 of her lines. She claims that she uses it in a satirical way to poke fun at generative AI, but a lot of people, if you look at the reviews for Femme Feral, highly disagree with any use of AI in literature, which totally makes sense. So at the end of the day, the AI use plus the fact that I was interested led me to DNF it. I also did DNF one arc, which I really hate to do, but it was Both Can Be True. This is one of those stories that I could not tell you what it's about. It was probably the most forgettable book that I attempted to read this month. I think it was about sisterly dynamics. One of these women is a recovering addict, and she sponsors another mom who's an addict, and then that mom goes missing. So her and her sister kind of team up, even though they aren't the closest of siblings, to try to find this woman. I think I just remember feeling like it was going to be more exciting, and it wasn't, and I just could not force myself through it. Okay, I'm adjusting angle slightly because I'm realizing I'm sitting up way too straight trying to meet this angle, and it's giving me back pain. The last book I DNF'd was truly so heartbreaking, and that is Seek the Traitor's Son by Veronica Roth. I actually got this as a free finished copy, and I was so excited to read it because one of the book talk girls I follow, Allie, she absolutely adored this book. And it was marketed to me as a dystopian romantasy, but when I started reading it, it was way sci-fi, and it was very heavy on the world building. So I think it was just my expectations going into it were false. Probably partly my fault, probably partly the fault of the publishers for marketing. And this is basically like a dystopian sci-fi with a very B plot of romance. And I thought the romance was going to be like the main thing. So it just wasn't meeting my expectations. It got really slow. I finally gave up on it when there was a section where we apparently went forward in time, but I thought we were going back in time. So I was confused for a whole chapter until they referenced some person who had been dead for 4 years. And I was like, oh shit, we're forward in time. And then I was just like, I can't do this anymore. Like, I just can't put myself through it. Wasn't for me. The wrong expectations. Okay, those were my DNFs. Now let's talk about the 2 books I left unrated because they were mostly smut or erotica. The first of those books being Lights Out. I knew that the 3rd book was coming out in this series, so I just want to get on the hype. And it was a fine book. I actually think I ended up rating this 3 stars. Looking back, I probably shouldn't have rated it. From what I remember, my review just said I got what I wanted out of this, and that is true. I wanted a smutty good time, and that's what I got. There was technically a decent amount of plot in this book, sort of, but I really only cared about the smut part, and I got what I needed. And the other piece of erotica I read was The Dare by Harley LaRue. This is actually the indie version. The novella is getting trad published, as well as her Loser series, which this novella is a prequel for. And I saw the Loser series everywhere, so I wanted to see if that would be something that would be interesting to me, but Harley LaRue apparently recommends that you read this novella before you read the Loser. And you guys, I liked this. I really did. I will say look up the triggers. It's very kinky. Lots of BDSM elements that may or may not be for you. But I remember actually leaving this book invested in the relationship of these characters, not just the smut. So I think I want to go on to read the Losers. And yeah, I had a good time with this. What can I say? Okay, we're finally to the actual full books I have read that are not smut, that I did not DNF. And we're going to go from my least favorite to my 5-star reads for the month. Unfortunately, we are going to start off with an arc, and that is attention-seeking behavior. This is a pretty short book, and you read from an unnamed character's perspective who is basically proud that she lies all the time. I was really hoping for a kooky weird girl lit story out of this, when it ended up being weirdly scientific because we would switch between chapters of this unnamed woman who's lying all the time and telling us about her relationships, and then these like factual chapters about like the court system, the polygraph, like just these random things that she would just lay out scientifically and factually. And I was just like, I don't care about these factual chapters. It was so weird. It was just very experimental, and I wasn't sure I was in that experimental mood, and I just didn't really enjoy it overall. Second worst book is another arc I received, which is Sublimation. Once again, a very experimental book that just did not connect with me. Sublimation is basically like Severance. Instead of a workspace innie and outie, it's a border innie and outie, where once you cross the border to a new country, a biological copy of you goes on to this new country while you stay behind. This is also a political thriller because there's this thing with this company and Sublimation. It kind of went over my head. It's also in second person, which I initially didn't mind, but did get confusing when they started merging. Overall, the writing style was just not for me. It was a little too experimental, and I wasn't connecting at all. This next one's gonna hurt some people's feelings. I am so sorry, but Into the Blue by Emma Brody. This is one of those books that the more I sat on it, the lesser of a rating I was giving it, because I started to realize that I really did not like it that much. In this book, we follow two characters who meet when they're working at the same video store. The FMC is 17 years old and the MMC is like 21. So there's kind of this weird will they won't they because he doesn't want to cross the line because she's underage. Kind of an interesting start, not gonna lie. But it turns out this guy comes from a famous actor family, and they start doing acting scenes together and becoming acting partners while working at this video store and developing their friendship. But then one day, out of the blue, after he kisses her for the first time, he just disappears. And then we time jump like 5 or 7 years to where she's working in television and he's a big movie star and they haven't talked. And then they see each other again and they find out they're both working on the same movie project, which is a reboot of this sci-fi show they really love. So they come together again. He reveals this big secret on why he left her. And then they basically break up again. They meet up again 5 or 7 years later. It's basically this big will they won't they second chance romance, but second chance over and over and over again because they keep getting together and then like breaking up. The dynamic really reminded me of The Favorites by Lane Fargo. If you've read that book, you kind of know what I'm talking about. I think partially why I didn't like this book as much as that is because in The Favorites, at least I enjoyed the environment we were in, which was professional ice skating, whereas Into the Blue was the television industry, specifically this reboot of this sci-fi show that I didn't always fully comprehend. It was interesting enough, but not interesting enough to make me not irritated at these characters. I can't really tell you this big secret this guy has without spoiling it, but I felt like both of our main characters were just so immature about it. Like I found myself eye rolling at times because it was just so ridiculous the way they refused to communicate, and then when they did communicate, they would just say the most vicious things to each other and then be surprised, break up again, and then miss each other like a week later. I don't know, everyone seems to love this book, so I'm an outlier. People think it's like the most emotional, well thought out romance of the year, and for me, it just kind of annoyed me because we all knew what was going to happen by the end. It's a romance, so I was kind of like waiting for them to finally get together because I was over it. Next is Japanese Gothic. Now, I actually got the Illumicrate special edition for this, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to read it. It was absolutely gorgeous, but I did end up selling it because I'm only giving this, I think a 3.5 is what I rated it. Something about me, I don't keep books that are under a 4-star usually. Sometimes I can keep a 3.75 if I have fondness for it, but overall, I want my read shelves to be a representation of me as a reader and what I truly like and enjoy and recommend. Japanese Gothic kind of just reminded me that I'm not sure Kylie Baker is for me. I've also read her other book, Bat Eaters and Other Names for Cora Zhang, and that one was a very similar experience where it's a punchy first few chapters and then it slows down dramatically. There's some interest in the middle, but then by the end, I'm not really invested in our characters to care enough about what happens to them at the end of the story. Japanese Gothic is sort of this time-travel dual timeline haunted house horror where there's this house in Japan. You follow a female samurai in the 1800s post the deconstruction of the samurai industry, And then in modern day, you follow a college student named Lee who is fleeing from America because he killed his college roommate and basically taking refuge in his estranged father's house. And one day through a closet in their room, they're able to see each other, and they kind of go off on this journey to explore and maybe try to prevent the woman's in the past death, because obviously the guy in the current day can look up her death and see when she dies and how she died. And the more I try to describe this book, the more I'm realizing there's really a lack of plot. There's really not big moments in here. It's more about them just discovering each other and going in and out of each other's timelines and lives. And so have this build up to when the FMC is gonna die, but other than that, there's not much that happens now that I'm thinking about it. Kylie Baker's premises always get me, and the hype around the books always get me, but then they just leave me feeling a bit flat and meh. There's a high likelihood that she will get me with another one of her premises, and the hype will also get me. But for now, I think I'm gonna be putting Kylie Baker's books down because they just don't seem to really resonate with me. I also got an arc of a memoir called A Dream Life. Now, I know many people don't rate memoirs because it's someone's life story. I totally get that, but I think I do because there could be someone's life story, but it can also be written well or not. So for me, I gave this a 3.75. It's about Wendy Swift. She basically gets married and her husband is keeping a ton of secrets from her, specifically debt and addiction. And he ends up going to jail for fraud and leaving her to be a single mother to, I think, 3 kids or 2 kids. She basically goes from being a stay-at-home wife and relying on him financially to having to figure it out all herself. There were just some parts of the writing that I didn't connect with. It was slower at times. Details did not need to be added. And overall, it was fine. It just wasn't super impactful on me. So I felt like a 3.75 was fair. Okay, we are climbing up. Next on the list is When the Moon Hatched by Sarah A. Parker. I actually had a beautiful edition of this book, the Barnes & Noble Special Edition. However, after really sitting upon it, I was going to keep it just because it was a beautiful edition, even though I didn't love it, but I ended up selling it. I read this because there was so much hype about the new book coming out, which by the time I'm filming this has already come out. And it had been sitting on my shelf since forever, so I finally decided to give it a go and read it. And I was really into it the first like 100 pages maybe, but then as I kept reading it, it slowly started to lose me. The enemies to lovers was good in the beginning, but then it turned randomly to insta-lust, and I was like, whoa, what's happening? There's this one scene in this guy's cabin that I just was like, what the fuck is going on? What is happening? It got horny really quickly, which I don't mind. Obviously, I read some Erotica and Smut, but it was just too fast and too abrupt for me. It made me lose sort of purchase in the relationship. And then it kind of just felt like I was going through the motions with the rest of the book because it's a long book. I was really just finishing it to say that I had finished it. I gave it a 3.75 because, again, it wasn't bad. I didn't hate it. And I know a lot of people complain about Sarah A. Parker's prose, that it's very lyrical and just too verbose, but I actually didn't mind her prose at all. Maybe it's because I was going into it thinking that it was going to be like the worst prose of all time because that's how people talk about it. But I actually didn't mind it at all. So that was another bonus. But overall, it was just okay. And the biggest thing was that I realized I did not need to pick up the second book, which was a big relief for me. And honestly, I'm not sure I really recommend it. So maybe giving a description is kind of pointless. Anyways, next. I also received an arc of The House of Now and Then. This is about a trans man who just broke up with his boyfriend and then moves from Boston to Cape Cod to kind of get a reprieve from this relationship. Except when he walks into his cabin that he's rented, he's faced with 3 people in his life and the conflicts with them that he ran away from: an ex-professor that didn't believe in him, his dad, and his ex-boyfriend. It's kind of one of those time loop romances that is very popular right now. But also there's a nephew of the woman he's renting this cabin from, and they slowly start to fall for each other even though this guy has his own kind of baggage and demons. It's a cutesy book. Is it mind-blowing? Is it revolutionary? No, but I did love the queer representation. Like, all letters of the LGBTQIA+ community is in this book, and it's sweet for the most part. I think I just want a little more depth. Like, these conversations he has to have with these people from his past felt a bit shallow and like he didn't really learn that much. He sort of confronts them, says what he wants to say, and they end up resolving and disappearing. But I really felt like there should have been more of a conversation and a self-reflection, but that's just my opinion. Next, I finished Mocha by Monica Kim. Mocha is actually the term for the spy cameras that is used to mostly spy on women that are hidden. Mocha is the word for that in Korean. This hidden spy camera epidemic is very much a problem, especially in Korea and Asian countries. However, it's a problem everywhere as well. And this book is dual point of view. You follow an FMC who is kind of on the receiving end of these tiny spy cameras. She's in a relationship with her boyfriend who is rich but kind of treats her like crap, until one day he reveals to her that there's been a Mocha scandal with them having relations being exposed, and so he kind of leaves her high and dry in the dirt. And she also works for a company with this man who is super slimy, putting hidden spy cameras in the work bathrooms, and we follow his point of view as well. So you do get FMC to follow, but you also get a very disturbing, rapey, incel-y guy to follow as well. So just be mindful if you're someone who's sensitive to that is what's in this book. Now, I loved Monica Kim's first novel, The Eyes Are the Best Part. I think I gave that like a 4.25. I really adored it. I think the problem I have with this book was that it wasn't gory enough and it wasn't female ragey enough. It wasn't vengeful enough. Our FMC really justifies most of the actions the men in her her life do, which I can see being relatable or realistic, but it just got a little annoying because I think this book was marketed as female rage, like epic revenge, and it was very tiny blip revenge. Like, really not much revenge happened. Our FMC is also dealing with the death of her sister, so there's a paranormal element in this book as well. And I think it was kind of hard because the FMC who I wanted to relate to and like and read about more ended up feeling more flat and lackluster than the point of views from this incel man who, while we hated him and he was disgusting, were at least more interesting, which is crazy to say. Monica Kim is an autobiography author for me, so I was trying to like this as much as I could, which is why it's getting a 3.75. It was fine, but I just wanted more. It felt like there could have been more, and Monica Kim kind of pulled her punches, so I'm really hoping with her next novel, which I will be buying, really just goes for it in the epic revenge gory area. Next, I've read The River Has Roots. This is a short story. It's very much fairy tale-esque. Very short. It's very lyrical, which normally I'm not that into, but I think because it was a shorter story, I was able to kind of wade through the prose and enjoy the story for what it was. It wasn't anything super impactful, but I think if you're someone who enjoys lyrical prose and you're looking for a fairy tale, sort of lower stakes, easygoing type of book, you might really like this. Okay, we're starting to get deeper into that 4-star territory. I read Dad Had a Bad Day. This was actually an arc gifted to me. You will come to know that I love weird girl lit, and this is what I would describe as weird, sad, dad lit, which is an interesting genre for me. It basically takes that trope of dad who's in his mid-40s who claims he totally could have gone pro if not for that one injury back in his heyday and is still bitter about it even now, and takes that and amplifies it by a million. It's about a man who just lost his job and is feeling very down on himself and finds his old tennis racket in the garage and starts an obsessive compulsive desire to start playing tennis again professionally, as he did back when he was a teenager before he got injured. And so he joins this club, he starts a men's team, and he just becomes super hyper focused on this men's team, trying to make himself feel better as a man, towing his 6-year-old child along while his wife is the breadwinner. And overall, he's like a terrible person, a terrible father, a terrible husband. But I think what I appreciated about the author is that I was really worried that the author was going to try to make me feel sorry for this man, right? That I was going to try to justify his actions. The author's prose is super simple, matter of fact. Like, the prose in this book is so dry, which at times was a hindrance, but also led to us having more of a matter-of-fact awareness of this guy's situation. And even though we did get some background on his family history, I didn't feel like the author was doing it in a way to make us want to forgive him or give him any empathy. It was more just laid out as this is his past, and yeah, he's a terrible person. That's it. All right, let's talk about Remarkably Bright Creatures. Yes, I did read this in anticipation for the movie coming out, which I'm very happy I did. The movie and the book are actually quite different, in my opinion. I'm not going to get into it, but the book had a lot more backstory on one of our characters, which I found was more appreciated on my perspective. We follow this older woman, Tova, whose husband just passed away, and she's kind of aimless. She's working as a janitor at the local aquarium in her small coastal town, where she develops a relationship with this octopus who we know is super intelligent and can think and feel independently as we get a few chapters from his perspective. She also has this loneliness inside of her because her son disappeared when he was 18 years old, and she's kind of lived with that mystery for all of her life. Now that her husband's passed away, she's considering maybe moving out of town, going to a local retirement community. She's kind of just needing to figure out what she wants to do with the rest of her time. And you also have another perspective of a man named Cameron. He is pretty down on his luck. He just lost his job. He decides to spend his time going on the hunt to find his father, who he never knew. And it just so happens that his father might be residing in the same town that Tova is, so they begin to cross paths, and Tova and Cameron kind of lean on each other to try to figure out their own lives and their own personal mystery. The main thing with this book is I thought there was going to be more octopus. I thought it was going to be like 90% octopus, 10% humans, but it's actually 90% human drama and 10% octopus, which is fine. Like, I get it. That probably makes more sense, but I did wish there was more octopus in the book, at least. I loved Tova. She was my girl. She was so complex, but also sweet, and you just end up rooting for her instantly. However, Cameron in this book can go kick some fucking rocks. He is such a petulant child. He thinks that nothing is his fault, that he's just been handed difficult cards in life. So therefore that gives him an excuse to be a bum, basically, and do whatever he wants, and everything's so hard because life's just unfair to him. And here's the thing, I feel like if you're going to make a character in a book unlikable, you either have to commit to the bit and make them fully unlikable and irredeemable, or you have to give them a proper character arc, right? So that way by the end of the book, us as readers can appreciate this character even though they have these flaws. And I feel like the latter is what the author was trying to do, but it didn't work for me. Like, I still really disliked Cameron by the end of the book, even though Sherry sort of like comes around, starts developing his life more and takes like a slight amount of accountability. But there's this moment in this book where he meets a woman who has a child. She doesn't initially tell him about this older son, and so when it finally gets revealed, she's like, oh, sorry, I didn't tell you. Are you mad at me? And he makes a joke saying, well, at least I know that you're easy. Huh? And I guess we're supposed to be okay with it as a reader because the girl laughs and it's like, oh, ha, she gets my humor. But I just remember thinking, ew, like, I don't like this character, and I still didn't by the end of the book. However, I did love Tova, I love the octopus, and I love the overall theme of embracing family. Next, I received an arc of Marion. Now, I would have kept this, except I did give it away in an arc trade. This is a modern retelling of Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho, where Marion initially gets killed and knifed in the shower by Norman, if you remember that from Psycho. But this book is a retelling on what if she fought back? And what if when she actually fights back and kills Norman, instead, it unleashes a bloodthirsty alter ego that demands revenge. You really actually don't need to have watched Psycho for this. I feel like I have not watched Psycho in years, and I was able to still get the basics of the story. Also because this is a very modern retelling. I think it's set in like 2022, so there's not much relatability to the older movie. And overall, I like this a lot more than I anticipated. I really didn't know what to expect going in this book, but it had a lot more plot, a lot more twists and turns than anticipated, and overall, I really enjoyed it and I recommend it. You follow Marion, and she basically gets treated like garbage by a lot of the men in her life. A lot of the men in her life are sexist, and that's part of her sort of female rage. When one day a boss she thinks she's close with and respects her asks her to deposit money under the table from a client at a bank, but when she gets to the bank, they say like, no, we can't, like you're not the owner of this bank account, we can't do that. Then she's just stuck with this briefcase full of cash. And coincidentally at the same time, her sister, she finds out, is being abused by the hands of her husband. She begs her sister to stay in town, but her sister decides to go home instead. Part of why her sister cannot leave the husband yet is because she does not have the money to go out on her own because she has her own business, and she doesn't have the money to leave him yet. So what does Marion do? She sees an opportunity, she takes this briefcase full of money and decides to travel to her sister to hopefully free her from her abusive husband. But the bus she takes there breaks down, and she gets stuck in a town where the only motel that has vacancy is one run by Norman Bates. And things get a little unhinged and bloody from there. About halfway through the book, you also get another point of view of a young detective named Hannah. Now, I did not enjoy her point of view as much as I did Marion. However, I could see why she was included, but overall, like, I could have taken or left her point of view. I think at the end of the day, this book really embraces the good for her trope, where Marion's just cutting up people because she's just so sick of taking shit from everyone, especially the men in her life. And if you're looking for a really unique setting and a unique retelling, I would recommend this. Next, I finished You and Me and You and Me and You and Me. This is actually part of my reading 5 romance books in 5 days challenge that I'm doing over on my TikTok. Now, this was actually written by a married couple, which I think is really sweet. This is a marriage reconnection romance. It's about a couple who's been married for 25 years. They're in like their mid 40s or 50s, I think, and they have 2 adult children who are currently at home because they're a bit aimless in their lives. And one day after a explosive argument, the husband goes into this shed where he has a lot of older stuff and finds a collection of their mixtapes, which they used to give each other throughout the decades of their marriage. Because he's feeling emotional, he plays one of the mixtapes and it transports him back in time to when he first gave that specific mixtape to his wife. He shares his finding with his wife, and soon they start to getting obsessed with this time travel loop of these mixtapes. And while they initially agreed to not go back and change anything, slowly each of them starts repairing mistakes they feel like they've made in the past in order to hopefully make their future lives better. But of course, they each take it too far and things start crumbling down before they can be repaired. This book is about appreciating where you are in life currently and realizing that even if you could go back and change things in time, who knows what would come of those changes and how it would impact your life differently today. And at the end of the day, appreciating who you are to each other in the moment. There's this line in the book which is kind of having a revelation that the youngest she'll ever be is yesterday. So there's no point on dwelling on the past or her current looks. Rather, she just be appreciating the body she's in right now. And yeah, overall, I really like this because I am married, so it was very relatable. It also made me reflect and appreciate the people in my own life. And when a book does that, when it sticks with me past the pages, I really enjoy that. So I give this a 4.25. It wasn't perfect, but for romance, I really enjoyed it. I also read both of Sarah DeMoff's books in May. I gave them both the same rating, starting with The Burning Side. This is a very impactful story about another marriage rut, but in this book, it tackles infidelity, its causes, and its effects on a family unit. You follow a couple who the husband just asked for divorce after he found out about his wife's infidelity, and because she's so frazzled, she accidentally leaves the burner on and their house burns down. So they have to navigate the hurt of this infidelity, as well as figuring out where they're going to live, as well as a bunch of other family dynamics, because if you know Sarah DeMoff's writing, you know that she writes the human condition so expertly. I love Sarah DeMoff's prose. This story was no different. Now, I will say there's a big no communication trope in this book where they basically refuse to talk to each other, mostly because they're so hurt, and after all these years of marriage and this betrayal, they don't know how to. But I will say, kind of like Into the Blue, it got just a little frustrating. This book also tackles postpartum depression, which I thought was really interesting. There's actually a storyline where the woman's father gets Alzheimer's, so there's also a discussion of the impact of that on a family unit. The Burning Side was good. I had high expectations because this is a lot of people's 5-star and 6-star read. I just had a hard time rooting for our couple a lot of the time, which I know that they're complex, and yes, I can read complex characters, but actually end up liking the Bright Years a little bit more, even though I think I rated them the same. The big theme of the Bright Years is the theme of addiction, mostly alcoholism. You follow a woman who gets married to seemingly the love of her life life who's perfect, but slowly he descends into alcoholism and the fallout of that on her and her daughter. And how repetitive the alcoholic cycle is, where they get back together, but then tragedy strikes and you switch point of views to the daughter. And at the very end, you switch point of views to the husband. For me, The Bright Years was a little bit more realistic. It was an issue I'm a little bit more closer to. So I felt more for our families, and I felt like their communication style was a bit more relatable. Again, it wasn't a perfect book for me, did not give me that 5-star feeling, but both of our books really explore just humans and our complex dynamics. And Sarah Demoff has turned into an autobiography for me. I will read whatever she writes. However, I will say both of these books are very similar in format. You get this big event in the beginning, and then it goes back in time to when the couple was happy in beginning their marriage, and then to now when everything has kind of fallen apart. Full point of view, and they're both just very similar in format. Like they could have been sister novels. I'm really hoping Sarah Demoff branches out in her style, and I would love to see something new and exciting from her. Then I read one of my favorite thrillers this month, None of This Is True by Lisa Jewell. It's just been sitting on my shelf for so long, but then I asked my Instagram, what thriller book should I read next? And this came up a lot, and honestly, this blew my mind. We follow a woman named Alex who hosts a podcast about powerful women coming and owning their own story. She's out one day in a pub celebrating her 45th birthday when she runs into a woman in the bathroom who says, hey, we're birthday twins. I'm also turning 45 on this same exact day. And from there, Alex starts running into her around town until one day, the woman comes up to her and says, hey, I'm leaving my abusive marriage right now, and I would love to come and tell my story on your podcast. And Alex is looking for something a little bit different and new and decides to take her up on this offer, but then gets entangled into this woman's life way more than she anticipated, to the detriment of her and her family's well-being. If you like obsessive, unhinged women, especially unhinged friendships, this is the book for you. I will say there are some very dark themes in this book. There is one part of this book that I still don't know how to contend with, and that is that this woman that approaches Alex at this pub, well, she started being intimate and met her husband, and she was 16 and he was in his 40s. Yeah. And so this dynamic, I feel like it's kind of brushed over by Lisa Jewell. And because this husband of hers was like a decent father and like not a terrible husband as he could have been, that it was okay. Or that our female character initiated that and wanted it and manipulated him, I was a little like, I don't really like what this is inferring. Yeah, it wasn't my favorite, that dynamic. And the other thing I did like about this book was that we kind of went with a main plot this entire book. This main person who was the agitator. And then at the very end, there was a bit of a rug pull where we cast doubt on these other characters. And I know a lot of people actually wanted more twists at the end of this book, but I wanted less. I felt like if we really just committed to the main plotline of this book, that would have really wrapped it up in a nicer bow for me. But overall, my mind was blown with this book, and I was up till 2 a.m. trying to finish it. So if you can handle a sort of darker thriller and love obsessive, unhinged women, this book is for you. All right, guys, we're getting to 4.5 territory, which means all the rest of these books I would highly recommend and I really love. Let's start with A Diary of Blood by S.T. Gibson. S.T. Gibson, I was not familiar with your game. I was told this is a Wife of Dracula retelling, but this is a Wife of Dracula retelling if Dracula and his wife Constance were in a toxic polyamorous relationship and they all wanted to bang each other all the time. And I loved it. This book is so full of obsession and possessiveness. And I will say there's also an element of coercion and manipulation in a relationship, so do be mindful of your triggers. You follow a main polyamorous quad with Dracula being kind of the head controller, but it's fun because they all just want to bang each other. Like everyone's bisexual, everyone's in love with each other, everyone's horny. Now the spice in this book is actually not detailed, like it's not super graphic, but it's plentiful and it's very sensual and like romantic. I really liked it and was a bit different for me. There's also a very vengeful happily ever after in this book that I really love. It's weird. I don't really know why this is not a 5-star. Maybe I'll go back and change it. I just remember feeling after I finished it like, oh, that's a 4-star. But then I really sat with myself and I was like, what did I not like? And there's really not much. So I settled on a 4.5. I think at the time just wasn't a 5-star feeling, but when I reflect upon it and how much I liked it, I'm like, maybe it is, I don't know. But the big thing that came out of this was that I want to read all of S.T. Gibson's future works. I loved her prose. It was beautiful without being verbose. Yeah, I was really into it. Next, let's talk about Starside by Alex Astor. Now, this book is slightly controversial as Alex Astor is slightly controversial because she has a whole romantic series called Lightlark. It's like 3 or 4 books deep, and people really hate those books. And that's why I picked them up, because I've heard they're YA and I've heard that the writing's not great. However, Starside is her adult debut and I heard great things about it, so I wanted to get a chance for myself. So I am solely judging this book and Alex Astor based on this alone. I heard some rumblings that people are saying that Starside is very similar plot-wise to Lightlark. I wouldn't know. I've never read them. I'm not going to have an opinion or judge this book based off those books that I've never read. In this book, there's 2 worlds separated by a gate, Starside and Stormside. In Stormside, there's little to no magic. It's very destitute. And on Starside, there's these immortals who have lots of magic. They're living very well, as well as these gods that kind of control everyone. Due to some battle, I'm not really sure, there's a gate between these 2 lands, and once every 50 years, 50 contenders from Stormside are allowed to fight their way through a series of trials to enter through the gates into Starside Star's side to hopefully journey their way to the land of the gods and get a cup of magic to take back to their side. They can be prosperous. We follow our FMC, who of course is small, but very mighty and very stabby, as she fights her way through Stormside to get to the gate. And we also have our MMC, who I'm remembering his name, Harker, who's the head of the King's Guard and is known for being basically inhuman. He can just kill whoever he wants. He has a god sword on his back. Big moody daddy, as in most romanticides, okay? Her and Harker have to work together reluctantly to make it to the land of the gods so they can each get their own cup of magic. It's this sort of enemies to lovers, but it's more reluctant allies to lovers and more I just fucking hate you to lovers. And listen, when I picked up this book, here's what I wanted. Standard romantasy, an interesting world to sink into, and the standard slow burn enemies to lovers with some spice. And that's what I got with this book. I'm not gonna sit here and tell you that this is the pinnacle of literature. It's not. The writing is very basic. At times, the dialogue is super cringy. The tropes are very standard. There's nothing inherently new or unique about this book. However, I got what I wanted out of it and enjoyed the plot and our characters and the world. And when it comes to romantasy, one of the biggest things for me is I should be absolutely immersed and feral for like the next book in the series if it's not a standalone. And I am for this book. I really want to get my hands on the new book that's coming out this year. So I'm not ashamed to admit it. I like Starside. Was it a perfect book? No, that's why it's a 4.5. But did it give me exactly what I wanted when I picked it up? It did, and I'm not ashamed of that, okay? Okay, finally we're getting to 5-star 4.75 territory. I am including both these books in one go because I actually rated the Assad Heir 4.75, but I rated the next book in the series, the Assad Crown, 4.25. So it's kind of tough to figure out where I wanted to put these books, but I thought I'd just put them in that 4.75 category all lumped together. You want to talk about feral? You want to talk foaming at the mouth? The Assad Heir duology. Because I was not so invested in a romance in such a long time that I literally think Fourth the Wing, which was my gateway drug into the romantasy space. Like, I was so obsessed with our two main characters in this duology. Like, I literally felt it in my heart. I was so obsessed. Now, I feel like it's kind of hard to describe these books because there is so much plot in these books, dude. And I'm not gonna lie, there's a ton of world building. There's names of magic system, peoples, places, things, rituals. A lot of it went over my head. I just understood the basic plot. And other than that, I didn't really comprehend much of it. But a short little summary is that the Assad Heir follows a fugitive queen of a former land that's basically been burned to the ground because of their dangerous magic. And she's hiding because she is the last Assad heir. And she has this hidden magic that she doesn't want to be exposed. However, she ends up striking a deadly bargain with her kingdom's enemy in order to save herself, which spirals into a complex, slow burn enemies to lovers romance that ends up forcing her to choose between personal survival in this romance and reclaiming her former homeland. The slow burn in this, you guys. Oh, it was so good. Now, this is actually a closed door romance, so there is no spice. When they finally do get to it, it's very fade to black. Now, that's actually one of the things I didn't love, I'm not going to lie. I am someone who's an advocate that spice can actually add nuance and complexity to a story. Like, it's more than just them banging. There's a lot of things that can be said and can be done during a spice scene that I feel like really adds to things. And because the slow burn was so intense at the first book, it was like this huge buildup to this one moment where they finally get together, and then it was nothing because it was closed door. And I really felt a little sad that we didn't get to see that, because one of the main things that this male main character is super icy, distant. He seems like he's represented to have some sort of OCD. He doesn't let go of control at all, right? So to be able to see him lose control in a moment like a spice scene would have been, I felt like, really vindicating and validating, and we didn't really get that. Not someone who needs spice in all her books, I promise. I just felt like in this particular instance, the slow burn was so delicious and I felt a little let down. Also, the ending of the second book, so the ending of the duology, was very bittersweet. I just wanted so much more of our couple, and Sarah Hashem just gives us a little like lick, a little taste, and I wanted the whole damn bowl of macaroni, okay? And so yeah, I love this duology. I'll recommend it to anyone. It's just very heavy on the world building, which a lot went over my head. I was just craving more of that romance so hard, like I was a needy child. Overall, it's fantastic. It's great. I was completely absorbed into the world, and I will read whatever Sarah Hashem writes because that duology was fantastic. All right, looks like I had 3 5-star reads this month, which is actually pretty good for me. One of those being Muñeca by Cynthia Gomez. This is actually a shorter story. It's only 150 pages. This is a sapphic, witchy, historical fiction, vengeful story that I ate up. And it's one of those books that I didn't really know what to expect. I had no expectations, and it blew me out of the water. This is set in the 1960s, and you follow a woman named Natty who practices witchcraft. When she applies to be a caretaker for this woman who's in this sort of comatose state, she's bedridden, and she can only communicate with her eyes, and her name is Violetta. But she has a theory that this woman is only in this state because she's under a curse from her husband. And so initially, Natty decides to take this caretaker position because she wants money from Violetta to start over her life if she breaks her spell. But as she works on trying to break this curse, they get closer and closer as Natty is queer and Violetta kind of is awakened to her own desires. And the sapphic element gets a little spicy as well, which I was not anticipating, but also loved. And there is a very vengeful happily ever after in this book that just felt so satisfying, the cherry on top. It just got released, I think, on June 2nd, and it's absolutely worth your time. My next 5-star read is You Did Nothing Wrong by C.G. Drews. This book left me staring at a wall, okay? I had so many emotions. I was so creeped out. My nerve endings were absolutely singed. This book will not let you go, okay? It has you by the throat. C.G. Drews is just a master at making you feel so fucking uncomfortable. I also read Hazelthorn by them and absolutely loved it. You Did Nothing Wrong is about a woman named Elodie, and she decides to get married really quickly to a man who decides to take her from Australia to the United States, and she moves in with him and this Victorian house he's renovating because his parents passed away and he wants to really renovate this house. Elodie has a son named Jude who is undiagnosed autistic. He's undiagnosed because of Elodie. She kind of refuses to see any of the issues he may have and how to help him. She just wants him to be her perfect innocent baby. And even though he's very aggressive with her and he won't really listen to her, she refuses to see that. But as Elodie and her son move into this house with her new husband, son Jude starts to say that there's stuff in the walls and that the house is creepy and unhappy and attacking him. And Elodie's kind of torn between believing that there's something wrong with the house or there's something wrong with her son. But then slowly C.G. Drews peels back the layers on both Elodie and her husband, and you start to question who's really the villain here? Who's really hurting who? And is this house actually fucking alive? And also, what the fuck is wrong with these people? Dark secrets of both Elodie and her husband get exposed, and these people are fucking nutty. They deserve each other. C.G. Drews is actually autistic themselves, and so I love the autistic representation they always put in their books. And there were multiple lines of dialogue in this book where it felt like someone threw ice on my back, and I was just like, frozen, shocked, shook, and it really felt like an injustice to give this anything less than 5 stars for how it made me feel. If you want to feel absolutely creeped the fuck out, like you want to pull your hair out, pick that book up. Last but certainly not least, we have my favorite book of May, and that is Fruit Fly by Josh Silver. Now, this is actually getting published August 4th in the United States and North America. This is a UK edition I bought from Goldsboro shop in London. You guys, this book is also fucking nutty, and I loved it. It's sort of touted as similar to Yellowface by R.F. Kuang, but it's really only similar in the fact that there is a woman named Mallory who, after publishing a successful novel, gets writer's block and decides, after seeing a Reddit post where it says that what's currently in the publishing industry is gay and sad stories, decides to download Grindr and meet with men in order to do research for her new novel, where she gets entangled with a young queer man named Leo who's homeless and an addict. And under the guise of helping him, she mostly just takes his life story and tries to pass it off as her own in her new novel. That passing off of a marginalized group's story as their own is really the only connection to Yellowface here, because this book is so much darker, grittier, and more intense than Yellowface, touches upon the throes and complexities of addiction. The depiction of addiction in this book really reminded me of actually that movie with Timothée Chalamet, Beautiful Boy, and also the need of people to feel like someone has a traumatic backstory in order to justify their current situation. There is an abusive relationship in this book, you guys, that made my skin crawl. Josh Silver's prose was so immersive, it felt like I was in the abusive marriage. Like, I had to put the book down because it was giving me the heebie-jeebies, but then I had to pick it back up because I was so enthralled. It also touches upon the relationship between mother and daughter. Now, sometimes parents fuck you up as a kid, but then refuse to take accountability for their actions. There was just so much to this book, and I absolutely loved it. It gets diabolically more unhinged as the story goes on. And again, as y'all will get to know me, y'all will know that I will love unhinged characters. I love weird girl lit. I love stories that just really take it there and commit. And that's what Fruit Fly by Josh Silver does. It fucking commits to the bit, and I adored it. The second this comes out, August 4th, you need to go pick it up because it's going to be the book of the year, I'm calling it. This is currently a 5-star, but I'm debating on giving it an infinity star, which is like my next level up because I cannot stop thinking about it. Whew, those are all the books I read in May, including my DNFs, including my Smut. That took a while, a lot longer than I'm used to, because normally, again, I'm cutting this down. I'm doing a quick yes, no, maybe on my TikTok. So I hope you enjoyed that. I am so excited to make more content for this channel. I'm going to be doing a huge unhaul of hopefully 50 to 75 books on my shelf, because I currently have like 450 unread books on my bookshelf, which is ridiculous. I also want to do a video with some Pride Month recs. And yeah, I have some ideas bouncing around that I'm very excited for. And I feel like there's a lot of niche focused YouTube channels out there, whether it be horror or romantasy. But me, I like to read it all. And that's what I want this space to be, is a place where we can talk about all genres, all types of books. I'm also a reader who prioritizes new releases. So that will also be a big part of my channel, I think, is rating and reviewing new releases and telling y'all if it's worth your time. And I will see y'all in my next video. Bye.